Greetings and welcome back to another installment of my Mass Effect class multiplayer guides. Wanted to get this done soonish or soon because there have been a lot of requests for a long time, ever since this DLC came out for the male Quarian engineer. Now, I already did some gameplay, a video, so I'm actually making this post-gameplay. And I gotta say, I am pretty rusty. My gameplay probably wasn't optimal, but I don't have to go through it all over again. So anyway, that's what's going to be. So yeah, with the Quarian male engineer, very different to all the other engineers. Why? It's the only engineer with grenades. Every other engineer has, well, lacks grenades. I'm trying to think of what engineer has grenades apart from him. None. Geth doesn't. Female Quarian does not. Human engineer, nope. And Solarian, nope. So, and we'll get to that in a second. But potentially, and I'll get to that in a second, as I said, because of the arc grenades, the Quarian engineer is one of the most powerful, if you want to use that term, engineers in the entire game. I think in terms of pure damage output, it's still outclassed by the Geth engineer. But, let's have a look here. Tactical scan is kind of a bread and butter power. It's unique to, barring, of course, the Quarian male infiltrator, it's unique to the Quarian males. And it's a good power. It's not overwhelmingly amazing or anything to that effect. But, as you can see, it's basically a power that reveals enemies and weakens them, or basically debuffs them. You can choose here between power damage and weapon damage. I've run both kinds of builds, so this doesn't really matter. After all, it's only 7.5% damage. That's not tremendously overwhelming either way. So whatever you feel more comfortable with. Like I said, I've run both. And then we have slow movement versus headshots. I actually prefer the slow movement. The reason why is because you already have a slow movement bonus, and 30% is not insignificant. It slows, especially for phantoms and stuff. You know, phantoms flip around a lot. Well, it makes them a lot easier to hit. Even the best players can't always get a solid headshot or even a body shot on a phantom that's flipping around. Whereas the 25% headshot damage ones, well, it's pretty nice. But I think that probably would be a better evolution, say, for the infiltrator. If I were ever to play an infiltrator or Quarian male infiltrator, I would probably play it obviously different to the way I play the engineer. And so, of course, yeah, there you have it. That's why I probably would choose that evolution. But I think if, as an engineer, you're better off with this movement speed. Headshots already do tons of damage, and no one always gets consistent headshots, even the best players. And I'm not one of the best even. I'm pretty good, but that's it. So slow is better. Then the damage 10% really is negligible, whereas area scan not only is a benefit to your teammates, but to yourself as well. So you have an increased scan duration of 100%. So that's 46 seconds. That's almost a minute. And you'll see in the playthrough that on your Omni tool, the enemy that you scanned, that single enemy, is highlighted no matter where it's on the map for the entire duration of the scan. Not only that, you have a bit of wall hacking for, I think it's about 3 seconds or so, maybe 4 seconds, 3 seconds I believe, with the 20 meters revealing, which is useful because the one advantage it has over, say, the Geth one is quite simply that your teammates can see it as well. So it's nice, and depending on what weapon you're using, right? I used the Wraith in this video, so I have quite a low cooldown, but I could just as easily use a Claymore, and I'll explain why I don't think the cooldowns really matter much for the male Quarian engineer, really at all, less so than other engineers. So it has a very low cooldown tactical scan. Incinerate, we already know what that's about. I usually like to take Radius, but that's because of arc grenades, and I'll get to that in a second. I usually prefer damage. So in the Krogan and Sentinel, or Human Engineer, or Quarian, I definitely would go for damage, I think, but Radius is, in this case, appropriate. And more damage is better than a slower recharge, in my opinion, as well as the armor. freeze combo is bugged anyway because the extra damage only applies to frozen and not chilled, which you really notice. BioWare's never addressed that. But then again, what kind of bugs does BioWare fix anyway? Very little. SMG light materials never got fixed, and so on and so forth. So I think Incinerate is pretty self-explanatory. Arc grenades. Well, this is the bread and butter power of the Quarian engineer for a lot of reasons. For one thing, they're hands down the best grenades in the game. Now, this is taking into account a lot of different factors. Now, I'm trying to think off the top of my head what grenades there are. They're Inferno grenades, frag grenades, lift grenades, cluster grenades, and now arc grenades. So we have cluster, Inferno, frag, lift, cluster, Inferno, frag, lift, and arc. So I believe there are 5 different kinds of grenades. And I've been thinking in the future at some point in time doing a grenade guide to the different grenades and their types and how to use them. Something I'll consider doing possibly in the future. We'll see. But here's why arc grenades are hands down the best grenades in the game. They have perfect accuracy. Virtually every other grenade tends to flop around and bounce around a lot, and that prevents you, not always, sometimes hitting your target, depending on what the area of the radius is. Now, in my evolution, I always want damage. I mean, the reason being it has an 8-meter radius to begin with. If you were to take this, it would be over the radius. It would be over 10 meters. I mean, it's insane. I don't think you really need that. I go for damage. I mean, it's not that much of a difference. And because I have a pretty good gear for the grenades, gives me a 5 bonus. I choose. It's up to you. It depends on what equipment you have. If you don't have the really good grenade bonus or a warfighter package with the combined assault rifle and grenade capacity, you might want to go for the max grenades. But depending on what you have, not prescriptive, you should probably take this. You see, electrical effect that adds for 10 seconds 40% additional damage. That is just tremendous. And finally, if you don't want to constantly be switching, I mean, I would go for armor piercing. Why? Because arc grenades are already, it says, effective against shields and barriers. Tremendous. It's basically overload in a grenade form, effective against shields and barriers. You don't need more. I mean, you could do more, but I'd rather have the armor because that's its quote-unquote weakness. It's not really a weakness. 75% significant. And like I said, they're the best grenades because of, not necessarily because of the damage. I mean, the initial impact damage is not the best. They're better grenades. Lift grenades are probably, I'll get into that maybe later. But because of the damage over time, 10 seconds, 40% additional, perfect accuracy, they hit exactly where you throw them, massive area of effect, radius. So, lift grenades, best grenades in the game. And the reason why I took area incinerate was because it coordinates well with lift grenades. I don't know if you see it in this particular playthrough that much. I wish I could have pulled it off more often, but you can create really good tech bursts, which would be, I guess, overload tech bursts, like electric tech bursts, by applying incinerate to enemies that have been hit by arc grenades. You might see it a couple of times in the playthrough. So you're very good at creating tech bursts with this combination of incinerate and arc grenades. Quarian Defender, I mean, I just go for damage. I want to make sure the lift grenades and capacity are as good as possible. And this is up to you. I've gone both ways, but I don't think, because lift grenades aren't a power, that's your bread and butter, and you're only using incinerate occasionally or in specific situations, I just go for more weapon damage. It's better, so why not? And unusually, I don't go for anything in fitness, but to mitigate that, to make up for that, I'll take whatever shield boost consumable I have, because, well, let's face it, it's better to have some shields than none. But this combination I found is very, very effective. But at the end of the day, it's still a support class. I mean, as great as arc grenades are, in terms of pure damage, you'll still be outclassed by GEP engineers, for example, or infiltrators. I mean, it is a support class, but as such, as a support class, I think it's possibly the best support class there is. In particular, he's a tactical scan, but it's a very, very good engineer. It's one of the best. And yeah, unfortunately, as you've seen when I talk about the actual gameplay, arc to the most effective way to play the male Quarian engineer, for better or worse, is grenade spamming. And I'll get into that a little bit later. So that's the build. On a final note, this has nothing to do with the Quarian male engineer. I've been playing around with the human male engineer a bit, and I found, actually, and I want to revise something I said, that the explosive drone is better, because as long as you have a decent cooldown, you can spam the drone frequently, and the shock is powerful enough to stun phantoms, stagger phantoms, and if you spec properly, it's over 800 points of damage. There were a couple of instances where it was really helpful. So I would change what I said, or revise what I said before, go for the explosive drone. That's what I would advocate now. And I also, for overload, whatever class uses overload, be the Geth engineer, Turian sentinel, or human engineer, the final evolution, I would also, instead of the chain, I would probably go for the 100% barrier and shield damage, for the simple reason that it's unusual to have so many enemies clustered together, and I found it really helpful against big targets, against phantoms. You can basically one-shot their barrier that way, even if you didn't, even with this one chain effect. So that'd be my recommendation. Nothing to do with this. Anyway, so that is the build, and now we'll get to the gameplay, and I'll talk about some of the things I'm doing. Thanks for watching. Greetings again, welcome to the actual gameplay. So here you see a standard game of 4 players. We're playing against Cerberus. I like Cerberus the most. I do have a couple of videos against Reapers, and every now and then I switch it up, but Cerberus is my favorite enemy, not because they're easy or anything. I like the variety. But having said that, let's get into the gameplay. So, as I said in the build discussion, that at the end of the day, the most effective, and this is pretty much indisputable, way to play the Quarian male engineer is grenade spamming. Now, that's not always a possibility, so if you don't have in your gear a high grenade capacity, if you're lucky, you do, and so you can spam grenades a lot. If not, you'll have to compensate somehow. In that case, I probably, as I said, suggest in the build, I would go for the extra capacity as opposed to the damage over time. But, concentrate if you can on getting good gear. Specifically aim to get the grenade capacity gear, because that is, at the end of the day, what makes or can make or break this kind of build. So the funny thing you'll see about this video, and this is generally true of the male Quarian engineers, as opposed to, usually I say, weapons kill the best. I don't really use my weapon very much. In fact, I'm trying to remember, basically, I didn't even get any trophies for using my shotgun or anything, if I recall or remember exactly. But I think it was the case. Because I'm mostly just using, well, arc grenades and, of course, incinerate. And I don't always pull it off, but I think there are a couple of tech bursts here that you get to see. But it's actually a pretty simple thing to do. Even if you only have 3 arc grenades, it's still very, very effective. I mean, grenade spamming, unfortunately, for better or worse, is the way to go with the male Quarian engineer. Every other engineer has things that you can forego. Really, I mean, every other engineer in lieu of something. I honestly don't think that you can forego anything. That's why I don't take fitness on the male Quarian engineer. So the Solarian, you don't really need Incinerate. I mean, it's up to you. Same thing with the human engineer. I don't really run with Incinerate on that one, and so on and so forth. But here, if you want to get the tech bursts, which are tough to pull off, remember, tech bursts only occur when an enemy is on very low health, that is after shields or barriers, and and whatever tech power used, in this case it would be Incinerate, tech burst will trigger the previous tech effect, which would be an overload tech effect due to the arc grenades. The arc grenades are basically overload in the form of a grenade, and so that's what happens. You would trigger that. There are a couple of instances of that, maybe not too many. I might try a solo run at some point in time in the near future, and I can just show how that works. It's easier when you're soloing. when you have 4 players shooting everything, it's kind of hard. I mean, it's good because everything goes a lot faster, and I was playing with very good players. Anyway. So, yeah. Spamming arc grenades, if you have the grenade capacity, is the key. Even if you don't, you need to spam them too. You should spam them too, but be selective about it. Now, one of my subscribers said it was difficult to find a build for public games. I don't really find that the case. Whatever your grenade capacity is, I mean, that is the key. Now, tactical scan is very useful too. You see me use it a couple of times. Like I said, slows the enemy. I build it so it slows the enemy down 30%. In that case, I mean, I rarely use it on grunts or troops. I prefer using it on big stuff like Atlases or dangerous stuff like Phantoms. And you know, the extra damage buff, 15%. It's nothing to sneeze at. It's pretty good, and it's okay. And of course, the revealing effect can be quite useful, especially say in a hack zone, where you have your friends or your teammates there. They can see the enemies too. And that's one thing that no other class, apart from, of course, the infiltrator, any non-male Quarian can't do. That's the only thing that you know. So that's also the reason I went for area of. Sorry, let me backtrack here. Getting back briefly to arc grenades. Apologies. The reason why I go for area incinerate, even at 1.5 meters, is kind of pathetic. If it were 3 meters, it would be absolutely worth taking in almost every case. Much like cryoblast has 3 meters. It's simply because of the possibility of tech bursts, if you can pull them off. Tech bursts are, like I said, you need to have the enemies fairly low health. You need to be able to kill them with it to activate a tech burst. But it can be very effective. So that's basically the way you play it. It's not, I mean, it's grenade spamming. If you're not spamming grenades, even selectively and tactically, even if you have a low capacity, I would say you're not necessarily not doing it right, but you're kind of cheating yourself, because arc grenades are the best grenades in the game. Some come really close, like lift grenades I think come very close, because they have the highest damage capacity in the game as far as I know. And like I said, I'm considering doing a grenade guide at some point in time in the future. But that said, try to spam selectively your arc grenades. If you have a huge grenade capacity, then you can be less selective and just kind of spam them whenever you want. Remember, 8 meters without any evolution. If you take the evolution, take a little less damage, you'll have an over 10 meter explosion radius. And they don't bounce around, they hit exactly where you throw them. So it's just a fantastic, well, it's not a power grenade, it's a great grenade. It's basically overload, as I said, in grenade form. Take advantage of that. Very good against barriers and shields. And if you take the armor evolution, it's not quite as good, but it's still very good becomes very good against armor. And the damage over time, if you can afford to take that evolution, is very effective. Of course, if you're playing with good players like I was, then things just die instantly anyway. But tactical scan is useful, of course, especially on maps where there are a lot of walls. You can't really see things. You don't know where the enemies are located exactly. Jade isn't really one of those maps per se, but the Ghost could be useful, or well, lots of maps. But if it's out in the open, a lot of tactical scan for those purposes, revealing enemies, might not be that useful. But 20 meters is pretty good. In fact, it's better now that the Geth Hunter mode has been nerfed. It's better than what the basic Geth Hunter mode range is, which is 15 meters now. I was playing the Geth Engineer earlier today for the first time in a month, and I noticed, oh, okay, the range is a lot worse. Well, the wall hack was never my thing anyway, so 15 meters was fine for me. I don't think it makes a huge difference either way. So, yeah, that is basically the way to, in my opinion, best way, spamming grenades. You see how little I use my shotgun. I mean, I took the Wraith, could have taken the Claymore, but, you use it, sure, especially when you run out of grenades, but I'd say grenades are your primary killer as a male Quarian engineer, to be honest. I mean, you're tossing grenades, and that's your main killer, because you can kill huge groups. I mean, if you have a group of 2, you have a group of 8, whatever, I mean, you chuck the grenades, they're all going to get hit 8 meter radius, remember that. And you'll see throughout the playthrough, I'm just tossing grenades non-stop, always running back to the box. Now, one final word of caution I want to urge viewers about is that because of the poor design of multiplayer, there is such thing as grenade competition. So that means if you have a player on your team who is going to be using a grenade-heavy class, like Lord Fortak, who was a really good player I was playing with before, you know, we were about to start, and he was going to use a weapon, a lift grenade-based Krogan Sentinel, which is fine. You know, I don't care what anyone plays when I play with him. Fortak's an excellent player. But then we realized, oh, well, if he's going to be taking lift grenades, I'm going to have to compete with him for my arc grenade. So he decided to go with the female Quarian engineer. So that's something to be aware of. You know, that if you are going to be using any grenade-heavy class, there'll be grenade competition. If it's several people using grenades, chances are you're going to be running all over the map just to get grenades, and it can become a pain in the ass. So it might be the case that you know, change your class choice based on something like that. If you're playing with a bunch of people, even in a public game, if you notice, well, it's impossible to know people's builds, but in public games, I think it's fairly safe. I don't see a lot of people using all weapons builds on the Krogan Sentinel in public games because you have to be pretty good to pull that off and do well. Fortak really says excellent players who can do that, but if you're playing with friends, though, you know, just discuss it with them. Say, look, you know, one game you can play a grenade-heavy class, and maybe the next one he'll play it. You know, so that'll work out. But that's just something to be aware of. I was fortunate none of the, apart from the infiltrator, I don't remember the name I was playing with. He's using sticky grenades, but I mean, sticky grenades are not nearly as. Sorry, I forgot to mention sticky grenades. 5 total. That was my previous one. Sticky grenades are not quite as useful as. Although tactically, I'd say in some ways they are just as useful with the proximity effect or proximity flanking. But yeah, no. So that's that. Didn't want to go too much into that, but I just wanted to mention it. So that's the basics for the male Quarian guide. You probably could expect future videos, not necessarily guides with the male Quarian. Hopefully, I can get some guys together and we can do some more kind of theme-oriented with videos with epic music or something to that effect. You know, we'll see. Like I said, I can't play as often as I used to. I have a lot of things going on in real life, unfortunately, and I do want to continue my Skyrim LP. So, you know, I appreciate all my subscribers, and I'll try to do these when I have the time to do them. So anyway, hope you enjoy the gameplay, and I'll see you guys soon. Cheers.
approaching!
Rendezvous at LZ for extraction.
Understood. Go, go, go!